Whenever we became live with HRBench, we studied what do managers need. We just don't want to throw a bunch of matrix into a dashboard. Yeah. We partnered with our HRBP team to ask them, what do you do when you talk to these managers? What does your walk around style look like? How does that come up? But we're partnering one-on-one versus just asking for data reports, right? They're actually coming to us to provide them with the information. We're able to get it to them faster. Talking with our HRBPs, they're starting to understand what they can do better when it comes to turnover, or what they can do better when it comes to hiring. Understanding voluntary, involuntary, all that stuff whenever we do get some type of pushback on the data that we're presenting when it comes through. I think one of the initiatives that kind of came out of this is, how do we identify those who are leaving and what areas does that make up?
For HRBench, John Youngkrantz's team at FirstKey Homes handed managers a spreadsheet full of numbers and walked away. No context, no trends, no story, just data. That's not coaching. On this episode of Pulse by HRBench, John walks us through exactly how his team rebuilt that process, creating dashboards that give HR business partners real trends to bring into manager walkthroughs, partnering with finance during budgeting season for the first time, and turning HR data into something the whole business now trusts. This is what it looks like when HR earns a seat at the table. Let's get into this episode so that everybody can get a really good idea of what John and FirstKey Homes is doing with HR data to empower their managers, make them better. John, how is your Wednesday going?
So far, so good. It's a non-payroll week, so we're in the cleanup stages of the previous payroll, and then now rolling into the next payroll next week. So made a little bit of time to jump on here. So it's actually been a pretty good Wednesday.
Awesome. We are here with John Youngkrantz from FirstKey Homes, and he's Payroll and HRIS Manager, and he is the HR data guru over at FirstKey Homes, getting everybody the data they need to plan with finance, to be better managers, and to build credibility. John, is there anything else you would like the audience to know about you and FirstKey Homes? Sorry, we want to introduce FirstKey Homes as well.
I've been with FirstKey Homes for 4 years. I started off as a contractor and worked my way up into full-time work. We're in, 29 different markets, 16 rolls up into 16 districts all throughout the U.S. So, we have a nice little employment stuff that we got to take care of here or there. We're not really in California, so we don't have that much issues there, but we're kind of all over the place in the U.S. And excited to be here. Been a partner with HRBench for almost 18 months. So I'm not quite at the 2-year mark yet.
Nice. And you're across 29 markets, 13 districts?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So, all right. So we're going to jump into it. One of the key things I hear a lot when I'm chatting with HR folks, and we're chatting with more on webinars and our podcast Pulse by HRBench, if you haven't checked it out, is partnering with finance and how HR can tie their initiatives to finance initiatives, especially in private equity environments where EBITDA is a big push. But John, when we were chatting about this, you are in the midst of planning and budgeting season, and you all at FirstKey Homes have done quite a bit to partner with finance in this planning season. And I wanted to start there in what are you all doing to make that relationship better?
Yeah, so this would be the first year that we've actually done any work with the HRBench and the finance team, because usually, the finance team is pulling reports from everybody, not only on the HRS side and from our UKG platform, but also, ATS systems and all that, try to get everything into their world. And so what we've been able to do with that is, with the HRBench that we have, everything rolls into HRBench. So we're able to actually have one kind of source of truth to get them the actual reports that they need. So, finance is pulling, actual year-to-date, prior year-to-date accruals and their GLs. We're working with them to check for spikes, look for, any type of roles that maybe have increased during the year. And that's where our data kind of comes into play.
Okay. How are you aligning your data with finances data in order to create kind of that shared view? And
so the org charts that we're able to pull out of HRBench not only contain the current headcount, but it also shows open recs too. So that's actually helped us eliminate a lot of the disputes on, where employees are currently sitting, where they're being, where their department or call center may be at. Of course, there's cleanup everywhere between, the finance team and the HRS team to make sure. And so that's what we've really been utilizing too, is the org charts out of HRBench.
Okay, nice, nice. So when you're going into planning and budgeting season with finance, what is the first set of data you guys start pulling?
Definitely headcount, right? Because headcount kind of, the definitions and reporting hierarchies can be, in one division, they can think the definition is this, whereas the headcount definition in, HR is something else. So we like to start with the headcount reports to make sure that we're providing that data correctly to them. So, including, temps, contractors, all that good stuff. So it starts with our headcount.
So how do the two different departments identify them differently?
So it could be again, who could be considered an active headcount person? Do we have, temps in the report, contractors, all that other stuff versus, what we're pulling out of HRBench? Do we need to include the temps for the headcount report, or is it just a temp job that was only there for 6 months?
Gotcha. So another question is just how do you handle like mismatches between what you're seeing and what finance is seeing?
And that's where the partnership comes into play, right? We want to make sure that, our HRS system, HRBench is a source of truth, but we have to make sure that whatever structural changes are happening with the call centers align down that data path. So ensuring that the data is just correct.
Okay. And so since you mentioned at the start, this is the first year that you've kind of done this particular process,
Mhm.
like what has changed during this cycle versus previous cycles?
We're partnering one-on-one versus just asking for data reports, right? They're actually
Okay.
coming to us to provide them with the information. We're able to get it to them faster. It's not so much as, hey, I need a report, and then you don't hear back from them, right? There's truly conversations going on with the data to ensure that the accuracy of the data that we're providing from UKG HRBench is truly what they're looking for when it comes to budgeting seasons, right? We talked about what could happen, hey, we maybe have somebody that's been in the wrong role or been in the wrong department for 6 months and they have to reclassify those expenses. It's not fun. So trying to stay on top of it.
And what has that done for HR's relationship with finance in order to get their next year's initiatives funded?
So there hasn't been really much pushback. You know,
That's
everything's
good.
everything's kind of aligned with the finance headcounts, reporting structures, all that good stuff. So I think it's actually been a better season for us. And like, what we're looking at, what we can do better for next year is to get more of the finance data inside of HRBench, the forecasting, all that good stuff. So we can have the actuals versus the forecast in HRBench versus just sending out what we currently have.
Interesting. So what's the forecasting work that you guys want to do?
So we want to bring in, how our accounting team, how our the finance team creates those forecasts for the 26-27 year. We want to be able to pull that information into HRBench, so that way we can have it to compare to actuals
Nice.
versus the forecast.
Interesting. Okay. So I want to get into the second topic and how you can coach managers with HR data. And when we talked at the start of this, you mentioned that you had built dashboards for your field managers or for HR business partners for them to partner with the field managers in order to tackle all sorts of things in the field. I won't say issues or problems, but just things in the field. So can you just give like an overview of what that process looked like that you helped build out?
Yeah, sure. So, again, we just kind of started utilizing HRBench 18 months ago. Prior to this, here's an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on it, right? So it turned into kind of a data dump for these managers to try to come up with and review themselves. So whenever we became live with HRBench, we studied the dashboards matrix, kind of, hey, what do managers need? We just don't want to throw a bunch of matrix into a dashboard. So we
Yeah.
partnered with our HRBP team to ask them, like, hey, what do you do when you talk to these managers? Like, what is your walk around style look like? How does that come up? And so we came up with a dashboard for each HRBP team to, apply filters for and have their districts ready to go whenever they have those meetings. So no longer is it just an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on it. You have graphs that show trends, you have the dashboards that have the matrix on it for your turnover and certain roles that you want to look at. So again, what has happened in those meetings is they're actually coming with actual data versus, just numbers on a spreadsheet.
So how has that changed the conversation between your HRBPs and the field managers?
They're able to go to the managers with a trend, right? Like, hey, this is what we're seeing in your market or your district. And they're able to actually show the trend instead of just talking numbers, right? So they're able
Yeah.
to see, hey, we were in peak in July, our summer's peaks, and here comes our turnover rate's going to come up, or our headcount's going to open, and what roles do we have open and all that stuff. So it's been great because they're able to look at trends, compare it month to month, and also compare it to other districts.
Okay. And sorry, I should have done this at the start, but what's the structure look like of the organization? So we mentioned at the top, you had 23 markets, 13 districts, HRBPs. Like, what does that structure look like so that people can kind of get a sense for what's happening in the organization?
Yeah. So each market is put into a district, and so our HRBPs own a district or two, and that's how they have that data rolled up. So they're able to take it to, the Atlanta district or the San Antonio district, and they're able to have those markets kind of pieced out inside the data. So it's filtered on whatever district they're going to, and then you can break that data down into each market that makes up that district. So, and then you can even go further into certain roles that, maybe your troubled roles, or the high turnover roles and stuff like that. So that's truly how we break down the data whenever we're presenting it to those directors.
Yeah. Okay. And so then the HRBPs have dashboards that they're able to go into. I think you call it, like, are they walking one-on-ones? Like, what did you
Yeah,
call
they
those
call them a
meetings?
walkthrough. Yeah, they call them a walkthrough. So
Walkthrough.
yeah, they call them a walkthrough, and basically what they're doing is they're walking them through their certain KPIs for turnovers, looking at open recs, how long have they been sitting out there. They're also looking at tenure, where the turnover's coming from, and all that good stuff.
And when a manager sees this, like, what are some of the changes or things that they're able to now do to be a better manager?
I think, the data actually becomes more of what decision is the manager responsible for versus
Okay.
just giving them a bunch of numbers, right? So now we may have KPIs, for the company to, for turnover rate and all this other stuff. And how can they get to that KPI, or how can we help them understand what decisions they need to start making? And that's what the HRBPs are doing with this data that they're actually presenting to the managers.
Okay. And have you seen like actual manager behavior shift with any of this?
Talking with our HRBPs, they have. They're
Okay.
starting to understand more what they can do better when it comes to turnover, or what they can do better when it comes to hiring. Making sure, understanding voluntary, involuntary, all that stuff. Whenever we do get some type of pushback on the data that we're presenting when it comes through, but it's I think one of the initiatives that kind of came out of this is, how do we identify those who are leaving, and what areas does that make up? Is it our tenured employees, over 2 to 3 years, or is it one of those roles that has that early turnover where it's after 6 months, we're looking for another rep. And so what this has been able to do is the HRBP teams can actually isolate the root cause and give those managers a better understanding of, hey, maybe we need to do performance rechecks, engagement surveys, all that other stuff. And it just gives the tools to those managers to keep the turnover low.
Have you had manager that a
Mhm.
manager that has looked at the turnover data and then is like, okay, yeah, we should run an engagement survey?
That's a great question. Again, speaking with the HRBP teams, the engagement survey versus the performance rechecks, we do, if there is a need for it, they will reach out, to get that engagement survey started. But it's mostly to the HRBP team really working with those managers to really understand, the onboarding process, the training, the ROI on the training, and making sure we have the right people in the places.
Okay. And what are the key metrics? Because you had mentioned in the start of this that you didn't necessarily focus on all metrics. Like, what are the key metrics that the HRBPs are focused on with their managers?
Yeah, so it's definitely turnover. So it starts with our headcounts, the open recs, the roles that they have for the districts or the markets, and then the turnover. Those are the three key matrix that is going to be in every walk around meeting that these HRPPs have.
Okay, interesting. The last part of this that I wanted to get into, so moving on to kind of how we've talked about HR and finance partnering, because HR is proactive now with data and you're able to align and correct various data. You're empowering managers to become better managers, change their behavior in order to retain people, prevent turnover. But I want to get a sense, kind of on the anecdotal side, how using HR data has elevated HR's credibility within FirstKey Homes across other departments.
Yeah, yeah. So again, whenever we talk about the data, right? Whenever we first rolled out these dashboards, it was very key to show these managers and upper management kind of tell the story of their department. Give them the ability to see what decisions them as managers need to make. So whether
Okay.
that be staffing gaps, engagement drag, overtime spikes, the workloads, however you want to see that in the data, it's not just telling them, hey, this is the number. You can kind of see the trend from month to month, rolling 12 months. You can look at it, start that forecasting whenever you need to start that forecasting, right? But you can see it in the examples in the dashboard whenever you're presenting it to them.
Okay. And when you first rolled out the dashboards, how did you decide what metrics to start with?
Yeah. So whenever we rolled out the dashboards, we asked ourselves that same question. We don't just want to throw a bunch of matrix on a slide and just send it out, right? We go back to, you know, what decisions are managers responsible for whenever they're leading a district or a market. Again, starting from the top, you want to talk about the turnover rate. That's a KPI that our company follows. So turnover rate, well, that's great. But now we got to see from the terms, what was involuntary, what is voluntary, what is company controlled, new hires, how long are they staying, new hires for, are we losing people after 6 months? How does that look? So we started with the decisions, that managers are actually responsible for and what we can actually give them data on.
Okay. And so you really simplified the data that you were going to present to the audience so that it was what mattered to them. And you had mentioned when we started this, when we started prepping for this, that while HRBench does give you like 45 plus metrics out of the box, you don't necessarily need to focus on all 45 for every manager and every conversation. Like, you were very adamant about simplifying.
That's correct. Yeah, because you don't want to overload the system, right? You don't want to provide all these matrix that maybe they don't really care about up front.
Yeah.
We really need to get to the meat and potatoes. So it's starting off like that. Hey, and we do have these metrics out here. So if we do have some questions on it, we can go and present them with those matrix or dashboard.
And can you share kind of a conversation of the metrics that you chose and how that changed the outcome for man?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So before HRBench, it was my team just creating a bunch of spreadsheets with you know new hires on it, active headcount, terms on it, and then just giving that to the manager. So there was no narrative around it. It was just, here's the data. And so the conversations have changed from, oh wow, I see the trend, or I see the root cause of it. We're losing you know we're losing employees in a certain role after 2 or 3 years because they don't feel valued, or we're losing them because they're leaving to go get higher pay somewhere else. So we're seeing the staffing gaps kind of come into play here. And so now we got the managers thinking of what can we do to keep employees, with us, versus always having that revolving door when it comes around to staffing.
Yeah, and I probably could have called this out earlier on, but you have a lot of frontline employees, right?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah. So, we have service techs that go out, and our maintenance techs that go into homes and do all that stuff. So we do have a lot of frontline workers that are always on the move. So we always want to keep them happy because they make FirstKey Homes what it is.
Yeah. And that's a good call because stereotypically, those industries have higher turnover. And so understanding that turnover in real time can be a really big deal.
Yeah. And that goes into, just the staffing piece. We're making sure with the HRBP team, whenever they're doing it, that, they're properly staffed, whether it's the daily workload, the trainings that we have coming up, and just the staffing needs for each district. And they're a really good component of making sure that, we're not falling into any traps. We're not having the overtime spike. They're really championing, the districts when they're.
Yeah. And another call out, because if you're reducing your turnover, one of the things that in talking with other, you're not manufacturing, but manufacturers and other industries with frontline workers, is there's still a persistent labor shortage. So of people hiring for those industries. And so if you're not having to constantly replace, it's not as big of a strain on the
Right.
recruiting side of the business.
Right. And making sure you have the right people in the right place.
Yeah. Okay. So we covered a lot of ground today. John, is there anything else you would like to leave the audience with in any of these sections of building more credibility, helping your HRBPs coach their managers, partnering with finance, that you think the audience can take away as a tactic that they can use going into 2026?
Oh, for sure. So whenever we talk about presenting the data to the managers, it's really key to understand truly possibly what the manager is looking for. So really understanding and listening to the managers and what their request is. 9 times out of 10, people, HRIS managers or analysts get the question of, hey, I just need this data. So whenever we talk to our HRBPs, we always want to give them the, hey, make sure that you are asking the right questions so you can get the correct data or dashboards in front of them. And, we don't want to create a worry or a panic like, oh, I lost, 5 people this month and I'm going to be in a shortage next week. I need to hire this, that, and the other. It's to truly make sure that you're getting that data and those decisions in front of them so they have that ability to make those changes or, make their decisions.
Yeah, that's a really good call out in getting your managers the data, getting them the context they need in order to make better decisions for their teams.
Yeah. You're looking at the trend. You want to give them, you don't just want to pull up last month. You want to make sure that you're doing a 90-day thing, 60-day thing, 3 months, whatever you want to look at. Working with them on a root cause if there is some action that's needed, so showing them the trend, what's causing this trend, and how they can actually fix it. That's what our HRBPs are doing. That's what we've been able to do with the data and the dashboards.
Awesome. Well, John, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and chat with us about how you're using HRBench and helping the business tie HR to business outcomes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you, John.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Pulse, the podcast that has real conversations with HR leaders linking people to performance. HRBench is the people analytics platform that turns HR data into business strategy. It connects to all your tools, HRIS, ATS, payroll, surveys, whatever you're using. In just a few clicks, you get over 45 metrics instantly visualized in boardroom-ready dashboards, benchmarked by industry and company size. Book a demo at HRBench.com and we'll build you a custom benchmark report using your data.